Halloween Horror Nights 2023 is quickly approaching, which means it's time to make a hype list. Hello everybody, my name is Dillon Thomas, and we are not in a theme park right now, but we are doing our most anticipated house list and scare zone list for Halloween Horror Nights 2023. If you are unaware, I do updates in the parks all season long for the Halloween Horror Nights event here in Orlando, Florida. I do a lot of theme park vlogging in general, but I figured today, let's dig into my top 10 houses and top 5 scare zones that I am looking forward to. Before we continue on, I do want to do a quick shout out though to Zombie Chris. He did make these animations that I'll be using today. So much appreciated. Go follow his Instagram and YouTube. He's honestly insane when it comes to Halloween Horror Nights content. He is very knowledgeable. He's been doing this for a long time. Without further ado, let's get into the number 10 house. So coming in at number 10 is The Exorcist Believer. And I know, I'm sorry, most of you are probably already fuming and probably leaving this video after the number 10. So I'm sorry, I'll catch you in the next one. However, for those of you that are staying, I mean, just understand that this movie isn't even out yet. It doesn't come out until October 13th. We don't have a premise to the house other than the description of the movie and the very brief bit that they put in the little tag connected to the imagery for this house. I'm not really looking forward to that much. I'm also not a huge fan of The Exorcist in general. I do know the history of that movie is kind of crazy to think of people coming out of the theaters like throwing up and ambulances there and like people passing out. I understand there is a lot of history to this franchise. Also, something to keep in mind though is I believe this is a Blumhouse movie, and I've heard that they kind of messed up some of the other horror films. I know they are known for making some very good movies, but from what I heard, it's mixed reviews on like their Halloween and other horror films. So for this one, I couldn't get behind it. It is number 10. Coming into my number 9 spot, I know a lot of you are probably going to be pretty angry with this one as well, and that is Chucky Ultimate Kill Count. Now here's the thing, I don't care that much for Chucky either, and I'm sorry, a lot of you are probably like, what are you talking about? Like, those are two huge IPs and we've known about this one since last October. I know, and I'm sorry, I don't care that much for it. I don't know what they're gonna do for a house to really make it feel crazy and frightening in there. I'm sure they could do some pretty decent scares, and I am hoping that they really make something happen here. One thing that I do want to say is this was going to be my number 10 house. However, we did get that tweet about the Chucky house in Hollywood, and they were talking about some unique, either animatronics, some science experiments or something they were trying to deal with. I don't totally know. If they can do this house well out in Hollywood and they bring the same kind of whatever science project they were doing out there to Orlando, this could actually be a very good house. Now, I'm a little confused on what they're doing with the doll. Are they all going to be animatronics? Are they putting like scare actors as Chucky? Like, I don't really know. For this one, again, it's my 9 spot. I don't think I'm that hyped about it. Yeah, I'm sorry. Again, two big IPs at 10 and 9. Now coming into my 8th spot, this is finally getting away from some of those big hitters, and it's going to be Blood Moon Dark Offerings. Probably not much of a surprise. I do feel like a lot of people are putting this in their bottom 3. And kind of rightfully so. It's a little vague. I think we're getting some cult action or something. I don't really know. I was kind of hoping maybe we saw like some cannibalism or something. We get a little dark, a little creepy. I don't think that's gonna happen here. I am feeling like this house could be good. A lot of people were predicting that we were gonna get a Salem-esque style house. I think a lot of people thought we were gonna get almost a reboot of Spirits of the Coven. And I don't think we're doing that right now. I think we are full blown in a cult or something there. I do see some of those symbols that we see with Dr. Oddfellow. So I know he's got his grimy fingers inside of all the scare zones, but does he have it in the houses too? Or maybe like in their original houses? I don't know. It's really going to be interesting to see what they do with this one. I do feel, like I said, again, it could be a really good house. We don't know much about it. The picture's kind of vague, and just the description's also a little vague. But if it's cult stuff and they do it really well, I think they could actually tell a pretty cool story. We just don't really know what the story is yet. Now, my number 7 spot, I might get a lot more heat here. It's The Last of Us. I know, I'm sorry. It's just, I don't own a PlayStation, so I can't even play the game. Also, I didn't watch the TV show because I wasn't hyped on the game. The game came out before the show. I'm sure most of you know that at this point, and the house is based on the video game, but I never got into the game, so I never really got into the show. And I know you don't have to play the game to be into the show. They're not interchangeable like that, but I feel like I just wasn't that interested in getting involved. I have seen some videos and I have seen some photos of what this kind of environment looks like, and that kind of makes me excited. And definitely this could be a very, very good house. This could potentially be a #1 house for me, just because of what they could do with the environment and some of the scare actors. However, I'm just a little nervous on what they're actually going to do with this one, and the fact that I don't know much of the IP is a little bit hard for me. Again, I know of it and I have seen things of it, but I'm not like fully invested into it. And for that reason, it's going in at the 7th spot. Now coming in at that 6th spot is Dr. Oddfellow's Twisted Origins. I originally had this one a little bit higher, and then it kind of ranked down, and it actually got into like my 9 or 10 range, and then it kind of came back up. So it's kind of stuck here right in the middle. It was kind of hard for me to find a spot for this house. The description, again, a little vague. I don't know that much about Dr. Oddfellow. And here's the thing. I understand that he kind of is like the creator, it seems like, of a lot of these villains that have kind of come to Halloween Horror Nights. However, I feel like there's almost a lot of history as far as story goes, kind of, but there's not a lot of representation. So it's hard for me to find a lot of information as far as like what we can physically see, as far as maybe houses, scare actors, things like that. Like I can't really dig into that character outside of just kind of like the story that they've talked about. So I feel like when you look at somebody like Jack or any of those, I feel like you could be like, oh, like I can actually see what they want this character to look like, how they interact, the mannerisms, things like that. I'm not really able to do that with Dr. Oddfellow. So at first that really intrigued me, but then as I thought about it, I'm like, well, I don't really know anything else, and it kind of dropped way down. It got really confusing. Like I said, sticking it right in the center, I think was kind of the best thing for me. But either way, I am still looking forward to this house a lot, just because we do know at this point, for the most part, I think Dr. Oddfellow's the icon, or maybe like unofficial icon of HHN 32 this year. I don't really know. Either way, I am still looking for this one. And a big thing with this house, because it says Twisted Origins, I think we're going to get a lot of the origin story of Dr. Oddfellow. I don't really know, or it's going to be like the twisted origins of these creatures and characters that he created. Now, if that's the case, I think there's going to be a lot of nostalgia hype for the people that have been going to HHN for 10, 15, 20 years, whatever that might be. But for me, again, I just don't really know. And for that reason, it is that 6th spot. Coming in at number 5, we have Yeti Campground Kills. I was really hyped when I heard about this house. Again, huge announcement the one day. I think we got like, what, 7 houses or something. And I know there was like officially announced houses or whatever. I mean, either way though, I mean, when this house was announced, I definitely looked at this and I said, people loved that Yeti house years ago, and I did not get to experience it. So I went, I watched walkthroughs, I literally just like dug into it, and I was like, this seems cool. I like the fact that I believe they pull in like larger scare actors to fill out these Yeti costumes. And for that reason, I'm already hyped. The one thing I'm a little nervous about is, again, the vagueness of this, because you're looking at a Yeti in a campground, and I feel like Yetis tend to be in like colder environments, and that's fine. I feel like we would have Bigfoot over the Yeti, and I know some people were upset about that, but either way, when I look at this house, I'm looking and I'm saying, well, you have a Yeti in the campground in, I think, the 50s. I want to know a little bit more about the story, but I think the idea of the Yeti house intrigues me, just because a lot of people talked up the last Yeti house, and so I think this will be really cool. From what I heard, the last one was a little campy, and I feel like this one might be a little campy, literally and figuratively, but I do hope that this house really comes together for this one. Now, if this house is a bust, it wouldn't surprise me, and I don't really know if it's gonna make the top 3, and I do genuinely feel like this one will float in the center. However, like I said, it wouldn't surprise me if this one kind of fell a little short. Kind of one of those things where you knew something in the past, you were so hyped up about it, and then when you get the thing again, it doesn't really work out that way. You know what I mean? So everyone knew Yeti was good, and then we get the Yeti again, and then we don't really like the Yeti kind of thing. I don't know. For me, it'll still be my first time experiencing a Yeti house, and for that, at least I'm pretty excited. Coming in at my 4th spot is my dark horse this year, and that's the Darkest Deal. You see what I did there? Dark. Anyway, The Darkest Deal seems like it could be a really good house. Here's the thing. The story is basically Robert Johnson, right? I'm pretty sure that's what the whole thing is based on. So instead it's now Pine Straw Spruce. Also, what's up with that name? Pine Straw Spruce? I don't know, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Either way, the house though, I think is going to be super cool. I'm really hoping they put some music inside of the house, maybe some blues, obviously for the situation. Now, I always thought that when it came to Robert Johnson, it was more in like the bayou, but I think it was actually like the Delta. And I think there's a difference. I tried to do a little bit of research on that. I think the Delta is not quite the bayou. So I was thinking we were getting a little bit more like voodoo style kind of bayou feels and maybe a little bit darker with like that swamp vibe. And I don't think we're getting that. I think if you look at the image of this house that is posted on the website, it is what I think a Delta kind of resembles. I hope what they do with this one is really tell the story well, but if they don't tell a good story, I'm going to be very upset. Here's the thing, if they can do this house start to finish, tell the story, here's a blues musician, he sells his soul to the devil and then like becomes a really good blues musician. Maybe he wasn't great at first, but after he sells his soul, now he's great. He makes a huge impact, he's super influential. And then all of a sudden, the dark stuff starts happening and bad things are happening to him and his family. I don't really know. I don't know what all is going to happen inside of this house. If they can tell that story start to finish, I think this house will be a home run. One big caveat to that. This house is going into a tent. I am 99% sure. Here's the problem. Those tent houses tend to have some issues with the audio, in my opinion. I feel like they're excessively loud, a lot of almost echoing kind of happening inside of there. So with a house that's based on music and the audio could be a problem, you see where I'm going with this? We could have some issues there. So I'm hoping that that's not the case this year. I really do hope that they do a good job on this house because I think a Robert Johnson / Pine Straw Spruce house does ultimately give us what we are looking for in this kind of music, kind of sell your soul to the devil kind of thing. Either way, look up Robert Johnson and look up that story. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with how good this house could be. Coming in at number 3 is Universal Monsters Unmasked. This house is going to be crazy, in my opinion. I'm going to start off before we even get into the monsters. Let's talk about the location. They tell you it's in the Paris catacombs. Do yourself a favor, Google Paris catacombs, or go to YouTube and look up Paris catacombs and tell me that's not one of the creepiest things you've ever seen. This is a real location. I believe there was a movie like So Above or something below. I don't remember the name of it, but I think they like went and explored it. It was kind of like a horror film. I think some people know what it is. Either way, just look up the Paris catacombs and you will understand that the setting for this place is already creepy. I have to also tell you, last year, I had zero interest in the Legends Collide house. I said, I don't really care about this. It's probably not gonna be that great of a house. When we first rated it, before we even went in, it was probably like 8. So it was like 8th on my list. Immediately the first run through, it was probably my 3rd best house. By the end of the event, it was number 1. That was my house of the year last year because it was so dang good. The scares were on point. The house theming already started great. But throughout the event, they adjusted. I loved that. They adjusted the house. They made sure that those scares that they originally intended, because you know when they design these things, they're like, we want people to get, hit here, 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 and here. If they're not getting them there and they're like, you know what, let's adjust it. Let's make these changes. They did it and they did it in a great way. Now, here's the thing. With this house, we have 4 monsters and I don't know if they're battling. Are we going to see somebody holding a head or, a stake driven through their heart? I don't know. I don't really know how this is going to work this year. They don't talk about anything where they're kind of feuding. And because we are getting an additional monster and we are going into the catacombs, I think this house is going to be super freaking creepy. Coming into our last 2 houses, we do have Dueling Dragons and Stranger Things. Now, before I get to those, I do want to say, leave your top 10 in the comments below. I want to read what you guys have to say. I love reading people's most anticipated houses. And then follow up with me at the end of the season. Come back here and then leave your new top 10 or put it on one of my other videos and just let me know, hey, I posted on this one. Now, like I said, we do have Dueling Dragons and Stranger Things. Either one of these, I'm gonna be honest with you, could be my 1 or my 2, but I do have to tell you a quick story between both of them. They both mean a lot to me in a weird sort of way. The very first time I ever went to Islands of Adventure, I rode Dueling Dragons. And that same year, Florida hit record lows. I think every employee in the park was just staring at us like, go home, why are you here? However, Dueling Dragons had no line. Nobody was riding it. It was literally just me and my family, and we just kept going on over and over and over again. It was awesome. Now, doing that ride, I loved to just keep going through the queue and seeing everything that was around. Every single time we would get done, our eyes were just like watering because we always rode front row. Why not? And just like the water would kind of like spray off the side of your eyes, and then it was freezing on our faces. It was that cold. So we had frozen tears on the Dueling Dragons ride as we just kept riding one after the other back and forth. It was so much fun. There was a lot of history with Dueling Dragons with me. And then when it comes to Stranger Things, I need to be honest with you there as well. Nicole begged me to watch Stranger Things. Since we met, I had zero interest. I'm like, I'm not joining the hype. I don't care. There was like pop-up bars going up all over the place. No interest. All of a sudden, about 2 months ago, I was like, I have a feeling we're gonna get an HHN house that will be Stranger Things themed. I was seeing some rumblings about it. I feel like it kind of made sense just because it was getting bigger and bigger. Let's just watch Stranger Things. I am now knee deep in Stranger Things. I am all in. I'm not knee deep, I'm shoulder deep in Stranger Things. I love it. I got obsessed with it. We binge watched season 1, 2, 3, and 4 in 1 week. It was kind of embarrassing, but we did it, and we put a lot of time on that couch that you see behind me, but it was awesome. We did not get off that couch for like hours at a time, stayed up way too late. Super good series, and I should have watched it from the start. Everybody that watched Stranger Things since like 2016 or whatever, kind of like they rode this wave, right? You kind of went up and then you went down, you went up and you went down. For me, I'm at the up. I'm at the all-time high right now because I watched 4 seasons 2 months ago. I am all in on Stranger Things. So for me, that is why I have Stranger Things at 1 and Dueling Dragons at 2. There is a ton of memories that I could put with the Dueling Dragons, and there are a ton of feelings that I have about Stranger Things. That being said, I do think either of these could swap the 1 and 2 spot. One thing I'm really interested in seeing about that Dueling Dragons house, though, you have 2 warlocks that try and steal Merlin's spellbook, I think it says, and then they get turned into dragons, and then we don't really know what happens after that. But the idea that they talk about choosing your fate, there is a chance that you kind of have like 2 houses here. Originally, I was thinking maybe we have like legit 2 houses, but then I was like, no, there's no way, because then we kind of have like 11 houses, and they're not going to do that. But what I started to think is maybe throughout the house, you can almost like split. You can maybe go one way or the other way. And as you kind of do that, you start to kind of like interact with different elements, right? So maybe if you go to the right, you interact with like the fire, you go to the left, it's maybe the ice. And then I was like, they're probably not going to do that either. That's kind of a lot of work and kind of a lot of space. So then I started thinking, I know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. And they're going to split at the end. Like that just makes sense, right? Like, so if you're coming up to the exit, and it's like, well, you either go right or you go left, and then you can get like a different ending to the house. That's what I'm thinking is going to happen. Let me know. Do you guys feel like that kind of makes sense? Do you actually feel like we might get 2 different paths, or I don't know. What do you guys think about that one? I do feel like it's just going to be an ending thing. Something I'm really hoping though is they pull in some of the props from maybe the queue. Also, like if you look at the roller coasters, they had like the dragon heads attached to the coasters themselves, like in the front row. So that would be kind of cool if they did something like that, like pulled some of those in and put some little odes to the ride itself. Either way, that's number 2 there. So let's talk about Stranger Things then, and then kind of what I'm hoping and expecting from this house a little bit. Obviously, Stranger Things season 4 was insane, and anyone that's seen it can probably agree with that. It was the darkest season for sure. It was probably the saddest season, and we had, I think, the most locations. So I think the fact that they can use all of those locations in a house seems really cool. You have the prison cells and everything that's going on over in Russia. You also have the Upside Down. You have Vecna's Manor. You obviously have Hawkins. You do also even have like the little trailer park that Eddie lived in, and just kind of that whole scene. There was a lot of weird things that happened over there. So I think they can actually do kind of a lot here. I do hope they bring in a lot of expertise on this house, because I genuinely feel if this house is good, I think this could be like a precedent for like all of the big time houses. Like this would be like the staple, like this is how good it has to be. The big thing I do want to see in this one, again, is going to be locations. I want to see Vecna because he's just a bizarre character. And the last thing I'll say about Stranger Things is they need to tell the story correctly. Just like the Darkest Deal, if they do not tell the story correctly with this house, I feel like it could be a flop. I've heard some very mixed reviews of past Stranger Things houses. We don't want that to happen this year. I was hearing there wasn't a lot of scare actors in there, and it was mostly just like props doing a lot of the work. So maybe that's why people didn't really like it. And I kind of saw that in some of the walkthroughs that I did see. So either way, let's just hope that they tell the story well here. That is my top 10 list for the houses this year that I am most anticipated for. Again, let me know in the comments below your top 10. Also, you can let me know, do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? How do you guys feel about the Darkest Deal? That one I feel like has been appearing in a lot of people's like 8, 9, or 10. And again, for me, it's 4. I'm really looking forward to that one. I also know my list being like Chucky and Exorcist at 9 and 10 is probably not normal. Now, that being said, it is time to get on to the scare zones. Now with the scare zones, I actually think all 5 of the scare zones will actually be very good. So I'm going to give you a list here still, but honestly, any of them could fit any spot. And the reason I say that is I think Universal is going to put a lot of effort into their scare zones this year. Either way, number 5 is Dark Zodiac. Now here's the thing. I don't think I even know what my Zodiac symbol is. I don't really care about Zodiac things. So to me, I don't really know what they're gonna do with it. I also don't know how you bring these Zodiac symbols to life. That's what they're talking about. I think I'm like a Sagittarius or something. I don't even know. It doesn't really matter, but when you have like a centaur or something, I think you have like a scorpion, and then you have like fish. Like how do you bring like a fish to life in a scary way? Either way, I don't really think I'm looking forward to this one as much as the others, but again, it's probably still gonna be a really good scare zone. Coming in at number 4, I think this is gonna be a shock to a lot of you, and it's Vamp 69 Summer of Blood. And the reason why is the idea of hippie zombies and this Woodstock zombie feel just doesn't scream scare zone to me. And maybe you guys can at least understand that, even though you may disagree with me. I just feel like it's like not my vibe to think we're gonna be getting scared by 1960s zombies. I don't know. I think it'll be a really fun zone. I think it'll be really cool just to see. I think the set work's gonna be really good. It's in New York, which means it's huge. Like that scare zone is just massive. I also have been keeping up with some of those updates. I think we just filmed tonight. So yeah, either way, they're doing a lot there in the Vamp 69 scare zone. I don't know how the scares are gonna be, but I think we're gonna get some stage shows, so that'll be cool. I think I just saw tonight that like the drum set's covered up there, so I think we're gonna see like a creepy band or maybe some like really dark images on like the bass drum. I don't know, we'll find out. Either way, it's number 4. Coming in at my number 3 spot is Dr. Oddfellow's Collection of Horror. Now here's the thing. My Dr. Oddfellow house is kind of right in the middle. This one's kind of right in the middle. I actually didn't even plan that. I just kind of put it right in the center. I think there's a lot of question marks still when it comes to Dr. Oddfellow. I don't really know what's going to be happening in this zone. The fact that he has a touch and presence in all 5 of the zones, or at least his creatures do, I don't know if they're going to like bring all of the zones into his zone, or if his zone is in all of their zones. Do the zones deal with his house? Does his house deal with his zone? Does his house deal with all of the other zones? How does that work? I'm confused. I want to see what happens. Obviously, the house is the Twisted Origins, so I think we're getting an origin story to either Dr. Oddfellow or the twisted origins of the people and creatures, like I said, that maybe he impacted, influenced, and then created. Whereas this is the collection of horror. So is this going to be like continuing on from there? Is it like, here's my collection of evil people? Are you going to start seeing like Jack inside of here? There's no way, right? I'll say it one more time. All 5 of the scare zones I think will be insanely good this year. A lot of people are hyped for Dr. Oddfellow, and rightfully so. I think there's a lot of history to this character. I just don't really know what's happening in this scare zone specifically. And obviously, we're not going to know what happens in any of these scare zones. It's meant to be vague. It's not meant to give you all of that information. But I think just my thought is we know kind of a lot for Dr. Oddfellow in this year's HHN, but we don't really know that much. I'm done being confused. On to number 2. This one will be Shipyard 32. Look at this, 2 and 2. I mean, this is crazy, right? 4, Dark Horse, Dark Deal. I don't know. Anyway, number 2, Shipyard 32, Horrors Unhinged. So I do understand this is not a Dead Man's Zone. This is Shipyard 32. It is something different, but I am interested to see what they do with it, because at the end of the day, you're looking at some like boxes and shipping containers, and what's inside of them, we don't know. I was there today, and it looks like there could potentially almost be like a boo hole on top of the boxes. So I'm interested to see, are they like coming out on top of these things? The boxes also are massive, and I'm wondering if they do some like puppet action. It would actually be cool if they like implemented a little bit more activity inside of these scare zones versus just people walking around. And like I said, this would definitely be the year to do it. Now, coming in at my number 1 is Jungle of Doom Expedition Horror. Here's the thing with this scare zone. It's in a location that I really liked last year, and that's a big reason why I'm giving it number 1. I do like that kind of area when you're going from Springfield into Hollywood, and I actually feel like there could be some interaction between Hollywood and this kind of Jungle of Doom area, kind of where they overlap over kind of in front of like Mel's. it would be really interesting to see if they kind of merge them together. Not in the sense like it's one scare zone, but maybe like watch the characters go between them. And again, this would be the year to do it because you have Dr. Oddfellow. So like maybe as they're coming from Hollywood over into the jungle, maybe like the jungle goes over and they kind of just like intersect with each other and then exist in both zones. So it would be cool. I don't think that's going to happen, but it still would be pretty neat if it did. I like when characters can blend into the environment. It makes you feel very on edge as you walk through because you're like, I don't know what's like real, what's not real. I don't know if they're hiding somewhere. Now we go to the parks multiple times a week, so I am seeing this zone kind of come together, and that kind of influences my decision here. I'm seeing a lot of speakers, I'm seeing a lot of fog, and I'm seeing some really cool set work. So I am getting hyped for this, and maybe as some of these other zones kind of come together, I might switch this list. But as of now, from what I see at this point in time, about a month out from Halloween Horror Nights opening night, these are my two lists. You have my top 10 most anticipated houses and my top 5 most anticipated scare zones. And I do feel like the houses are a little bit more set in stone on my hype list. And then the scare zones, like I said, I honestly feel like I could put any of them 1, any of them 5. I just think they're going to have very good scare zones this year. And I'm really looking forward to it. And hopefully you guys are following along in the updates that I do in the parks, because again, we are seeing new things day to day, basically at this point. It was a little slow for a little while, but I feel like every single day they are adding something inside of those parks. And hopefully you guys did have some fun checking out my list today. And again, this is just my opinion. It's not right. It's not wrong. I mean, maybe to some of you it's wrong, and that's okay. Let me know. Either way, I do want to say thank you so much for hanging out with me in this weird home vlog thing that's going on here. We will be back in the parks really soon, but I will see you in the fog.